This is the fifth skill of the TSA, which is identifying assumptions. So let's have a go how we do this. We ought to describe what an assumption is first. It's simply something that is not stated in the argument, so in the passage, but which the conclusion of the passage relies on, right? So the passage has made an argument. It might have said, okay, premise one, so statement one, blah, 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 premise two, blah, blah, blah. Therefore, this conclusion is true, whatever the conclusion is. But actually, we need a premise three that is not in the passage, but the conclusion relies on an extra premise, premise three, in which case premise three is the assumption because the conclusion relies on it, but it's not in the passage. So if the assumption is not true, the argument falls apart, basically. The key thing here is, if you remember when we did identifying the main conclusion, we said it's explicit in the passage. This time, it's explicitly not in the passage. The assumption is not in the passage. That is the first prerequisite to find the assumption. We do these by first finding what the conclusion of the argument is. We look for why it's supported, and then we look at the options and see which one of them the conclusion relies on that's not in the passage. I like this tip. Sometimes saying yes, but after the conclusion you identify and following the assumption you think it is can be a good way to check your answer. So, you might read the passage and it says, I don't know, therefore cats are better than dogs, and you'll go yes, but, and then there might be an assumption which is something like cats have more disease than dogs that can harm humans or something like that. Don't confuse rebuttals or conclusions with assumptions, right? A rebuttal is something obviously that contradicts the argument. That is not an assumption. An assumption is something which the argument relies on. And check what option makes sense as a premise by putting it in the paragraph. So if you read the whole paragraph, put what you think the assumption is somewhere in the paragraph, acting as an extra premise, and see if it still makes good sense or if that sentence is actually useless. Let's do a couple of examples here. This is 2015 question 40. Car owners must have insurance in case they have an accident. Similarly, homeowners have insurance in case anyone on their property is injured and claims compensation. However, insurance is not required for dog owners. Any injury caused by a dog is compensated by taking the owner to court, which is not easy. A law must be passed to make insurance compulsory for every dog owner. Any injuries will be paid for by the insurance companies, not long-suffering taxpayers. So we can identify the conclusion here is a law must be passed to make insurance compulsory for every dog owner. That's clearly what the passage is trying to argue throughout. So which one of these could be a premise for that argument, basically, and is not explicit in the passage? So, A, dog owners would find it hard to pay for insurance. So we don't need to think whether they're true or not. We just need to think, does the conclusion rely on that? Does the conclusion that a law must be passed to make insurance compulsory rely on the fact that dog owners find it hard? Well, no, it doesn't. This is actually more of a rebuttal to the argument. As I said earlier, don't confuse rebuttals with assumptions. This conclusion does not rely on this sentence at all, so we can rule that out. B, all insurance companies would want to participate in the scheme. Again, that does not, the conclusion here does not rely on this to be true, so we can rule that out. C, all dog owners would obey the law. Does the conclusion that a law must be passed to make insurance compulsory for every dog owner rely on the fact that dog owners would obey the law? Well, yes, it does, because if they didn't obey the law, then they wouldn't. Then the insurance becoming compulsory would be irrelevant. So this looks quite promising, because the argument that we should pass this law is irrelevant if no one follows said law. D, most injuries are caused by illegal breeds of dog. It's not in the passage, but it's not an assumption because it doesn't talk about different breeds of dogs or anything. It's just talking about every dog owner, so we can rule that out. And E, injured parties can afford to take dog owners to court. Again, they might be able to, but even if this were to be true, it does not strengthen this argument at all, right? Whether injured parties can afford to take dog owners to court or not does not affect this conclusion, because the conclusion is about fairness rather than affordability. So we can rule that out as well, and the answer looks to be C. This is 2020 question 3. In the UK, we are increasingly engrossed by entertainment. We devote more time to it than sleep and spend more money on it than food and drink. The aim of entertainment is to create a make-believe situation in which emotions can be excited and discharged without affecting real life. While entertainment has its proper place, it can become a preoccupation, dominating our thoughts and sapping our emotional energy. When this happens, the real world of action starts to appear comparatively dull and tedious, and this in turn undermines social cohesion. Our increasing use of entertainment, then, is threatening our well-being. There's your conclusion. Let's see what the assumption is. A. Our well-being depends on social cohesion. Well, this is interesting because it says the real world of action starts to appear comparatively dull and tedious, and this undermines social cohesion. So what it's actually gone is it's gone from talking about us undermining social cohesion, therefore this threatens our well-being. But that assumes, it doesn't say this in the passage, even though it seems obvious, it doesn't say in the passage that this undermining of social cohesion then leads to threatening our well-being. There is nothing that actually proves that jump in the steps. So actually, A looks very, very likely. But let's have a look at the others anyway. B, people prefer entertainment to food and drink. I mean, this conclusion of increasing use of entertainment threatening our well-being does not rely on this at all. C, viewers copy the behaviour they see in entertainment media. Again, it doesn't say on the passage whether that's a good or bad thing. It doesn't, doesn't mention how that affects well-being at all. A lot of these in the assumption questions, a lot of the options will just be irrelevant. D, emotions pose a threat to society. Again, well-being, not emotions, right? So that's not the same thing. And E, the general public are addicted to entertainment. This is the most convincing answer that I don't think it is. So A and E are the two most convincing answers, but A is far more convincing because it's directly, you can see the direct assumption here in this sort of jump of a step. Often if you go sentence by sentence, you read sentence by sentence, and you see where there's a jump in the paragraph, you see where they've gone from sort of A to C without crossing premise B, that's where the assumption should be. If we put here, when this happens, the real world of action starts to be comparatively dull and tedious, and this in turn undermines social cohesion. Our well-being depends on social cohesion, therefore entertainment threatens our well-being. That works a lot better than what's done here. The reason why I don't think it's E is because, yes, you can say that addiction would affect our well-being, but the argument here doesn't rely on the fact that we're addicted to attainment as such. It's already saying we are increasingly engrossed by entertainment. We assume everything in the paragraph is true. It says we are increasingly engrossed by entertainment. Whether we're addicted or not makes no odds then to our increasing use of entertainment threatens our well-being. We might not actually use it that much at all, but the fact that we are increasing it is enough for this conclusion to be drawn. It doesn't rely on the fact that we're addicted or not. So that's the subtle reason why it's not E and this is A. 2022, question 22. In a recent UK news broadcast, a white reporter appeared to mistake a Labour Member of Parliament, who is black, for another MP who is also black. This shows the dangers of a lack of diversity in workplaces. It's not the first time that such a mistake has occurred. A week earlier, the same television channel had mistakenly shown footage of LeBron James in their coverage of the death of his fellow basketball star Kobe Bryant. A recent report showed that only 40.8% of television channels' workforce were from a minority ethnic or racial background. Media organisations in the UK should take this as a wake-up call and take steps to ensure that the diversity of the workforce mirrors that of the wider population. You should really be able to find the assumption here without even looking at the options, but the conclusion anyway is media organisations in the UK should take steps to ensure that the diversity of the workforce mirrors that of the wider population. Let's see what the assumption is. A reporter of the same racial background as the MPs but not have made this type of mistake. That does not support, strengthen this conclusion at all, so it's not A. B, mistakes like the one identified in the passage are common in the media. This seems okay for now, so we'll come back to it. C, media organisations have a moral duty to ensure they have a diverse workforce. The reason that they are saying that media organisations should be diverse isn't to do with morality as such. It's to do with the fact that lack of diversity is just a bad thing and that it affects people badly. It makes them have a narrow worldview and etc. So it's not that. D, having a more diverse workforce enables mistakes like these to be avoided. That's very convincing because it's saying, we don't want these mistakes to happen of people being, called something that they're not, someone that they're not. So they should, media organizations should increase diversity. But at no point does it actually say that will fix the problem. And so D looks very convincing as an assumption, but we have also put an arrow by B, so we'll check at the end. E, similar types of errors do not take place in any other workplace. This sort of thing, this sort of option comes up like at least once a paper, and it's never the answer, because whether it happens in other things or not is irrelevant. If it is bad in every industry, that still means it's good to fix it in one industry, right? It's like if someone does something and someone does something bad and someone else does something bad, right? It is still worth it. It's still a good thing to fix one of those mistakes. And one of those people cannot say, oh, well, the other person's doing it, so I don't need to fix myself. That's not a valid argument, right? If it's wrong, it is wrong. It is just not a valid argument. So you can rule it out. Yes, you can say hypocrisy and whatever, but for the sake of the TSA, you rule those answers out straight away. Well, between B and D, let's try and fit it in the passage here. So we'll go from here. A recent report showed that only 40.8% of television channels workforce were from a minority ethnic or racial background. Mistakes like the ones identified in the passage are common in the media. Therefore, media organisations should take this a wake-up call. It's probably less good than D, because D is directly linked to the passage. It could directly sort of put itself in the passage and strengthen it. We've gone again A to C without going to B, as in we've gone from premise A to conclusion C, and we've missed out statement B, which is, I think, this statement here. B, mistakes on the passage are common in the media. Does it strengthen this argument that much if it was put in the passage? Probably not. The conclusion probably doesn't rely on this to be true, whether it's common or not. It just happens and so needs to be fixed. Rather like how I said it can't be E. It can't really be B, because even if these things happen a little bit, they should still be fixed, is what the passage is saying. We can therefore probably just about rule B out. But the answer is D, and that's probably, hopefully, what your gut instinct said, is we've gone from it's bad to have this diversity because people mistake black people for other black people, so we should make workforces more diverse, but it never said that making those workforces more diverse would actually stop those mistakes. So the answer is D. Hopefully that helps. See you in the next video.